Alright, so we're going to cover a lot of things in this video, so let's get right to it. The first thing is, who is a good candidate for a full lawn renovation? I can think of many different scenarios, but let's go over three probably most common scenarios as to why you might want to do a lawn renovation. First thing is that you want to change your grass type from one to another. So maybe you have an older version of grass, like an old version of Kentucky bluegrass. It struggles in the summer and you want to do something like a newer tall fescue that might do much better without as much irrigation. So that would be one scenario where you want to change your grass type completely. The second thing is you have a mix of grasses already that don't really go that well together. So this would be another scenario where maybe you had a grass type, but over the years certain things invaded and it just doesn't look uniform and even anymore. You see patches of different things and you want an even, consistent look to the lawn. The other thing would be if you had some sort of construction or you have a very uneven ground that you're going to need to fix and you're going to need to do some sort of work to it, to which you're going to be ruining pretty much what you have there as far as the lawn goes, and you're going to need to do a renovation anyway. So those are the three most common scenarios I can think of right offhand. Like I said, there are probably more than that. Typically, it's a scenario looking at one of those things. Now, who may want to just overseed a lawn instead of do a full renovation? So quickly, the difference between that is that you're keeping your existing grass, you're not removing it or killing it, but you're just simply adding a new grass seed over top of that. So that's why it's called overseeding. You're just putting that grass seed over top of what you have, and you're not removing the lawn or spraying it out or anything like that. So who would be a good candidate for this? If you have an okay lawn or you have a scenario where you don't mind what you have as far as the grass type, but you just want to thicken it up, you want to improve maybe with some new cultivars of grass seed, this would be a really good scenario for that. This would also be for someone who doesn't necessarily mind that you may have a few different grass types in your lawn. As long as you keep it mowed and it's looking pretty good overall, there are many people who are totally fine with this and there's no problem with that either. It all comes down to your expectations of how much of a consistent look you want in your own yard. But if you're okay with different grass types here and there, this is another scenario where you can just overseed and just make everything look a bit more consistent. And for a lot of people who are just getting started into lawn care, this is a really good scenario for cool season grasses. If you have a weed-filled lawn right now, or it's just thin in general, it's been neglected, you don't want to go to the whole full renovation thing yet, you just want to improve what you have. Overseeding is a great way to do this. Typically, I would like to see at least 6 to 8 weeks of the grass seed on the ground germinated before you get to your first frost date. So this is going to be different for all people across the country or in different countries as well. But look up the frost date in your area and try to get a scenario as to when you need to get this grass seed on the ground and growing in before you get to that first frost date, just because you want it the most mature that it can possibly be by the time it gets to that frost. So then if you're doing a full renovation, you're going to be spraying out your lawn. This can really start midsummer here, whenever you feel comfortable with it pretty much looking terrible for the rest of the summer. For us, that would be here about mid-July or so, because I want to be planting mid to late August for most of the grass types in order to get as many weeks of maturity before that frost date here. Our typical frost date here in central Iowa is early October. So I'm going to start spraying very soon here in terms of renovation, and that way if I miss any spots, or I also want to make sure that weeds come back up, so anything that was in the ground that may start growing again, you want to do another application and get all of that stuff removed before you put down your grass seed and start with as blank of a slate as possible. What do you use for the spray? I use glyphosate 41% is what I usually typically use in all of the scenarios that I've done in the past. That's what I'll be using again this year. If you'd like to see that process, how it's done, how to mix the product and all that stuff, I do have a few previous videos on that. All of this stuff that I'm talking about today in terms of video links, all of that will be in the description of this video so that you can go look at some other things that I've already made, previous videos and all of that. So watering a dead lawn, I know that might sound very counterintuitive, but if you're not under any watering restrictions or any major ones right now, after you do that spray, it doesn't have to be a set consistent schedule, but getting some water on the ground again to make sure that even after the grass is dying, any of those weeds that come up or any of the areas that you missed when you sprayed, those should look really nice and green if you start watering again. And that way you'll know exactly where to spray on that second round. Usually about 2 to 3 weeks after that first spray will be when I will go out again and make sure that I hit everything that I missed, or also any of the weeds that pop up and any of the things that I see in the yard that look like they need to be killed off again before we put the seed down. Now early on in the process, it's also a very good time to prepare your tools and your grass seed. So obviously one of the most important aspects of this cool season lawn renovation is the grass seed itself. Without that, you're not going to have a new lawn. So make sure you have that planned out. So I cannot stress this enough that if you're going to go to the work of a full lawn renovation, pick the best grass seeds that you can possibly get. Spend the money now and you're going to thank me later. Once the grass seed grows in, you're going to see why it's important. They're going to do better in different stress scenarios. You're going to be better against drought and resist fungus more. You're going to get the best color possible out of these grasses as well. I have a whole lineup of cool season grass seeds under my own brand on my website, so check that out. But there's some other things you want to think about as far as tools. Maybe you have a pretty thick lawn right now. Maybe you need some rakes, maybe you need a dethatcher in order to get through that thick lawn even when it's dead to make sure that the new seed gets down to the soil layer, or maybe you want to rent some of these tools. So planning this all out ahead of time is important so that you don't get right to the day of your project and not have some of this stuff figured out. So I also wanted to mention right now, special to this video and for my viewers only, we're doing a sale on the lawn level that I have available. Also, Landsea has been kind enough to do a sale for my viewers only on the peat moss compost spreader that they have available. So check out those specific deals going on right now if you want to save on some of these tools and preparing for your renovation. A couple other things you're going to want to think about ahead of time would be, I like to cover my grass seed after I put it down with a light layer of something, whether that's just a really light layer of topsoil, really light layer of compost or peat moss, or any of these other mulch type products that go down over the grass to hold it in place. Be thinking about that ahead of time so you have those things in place for right after you get the seed onto the ground. Also, there's ways to help prevent weeds in your project as well. So that's a product called Tenacity. This is the only type of weed prevention product that you can use that's safe for seeding. So it's not going to affect the seed, but it is going to help to kill off any weeds during your renovation. It's not 100% effective, but it will be better than nothing. So that either comes in a sprayable form that you can do, or there's a starter fertilizer that has this product built into it. I've used both of these in the past. It just depends on whether you like spraying or you're going to be putting down a starter fertilizer most likely anyway, and you just want that product in there. And then probably the other most important thing to be thinking about ahead of time, other than the seed, would be your irrigation system or a DIY irrigation system that you rig up. Whatever you want to do, the watering is a very important step in your long-term success of this project. I have a video on a temporary system that you can build very easily yourself if you don't have a system. Otherwise, if you happen to have an irrigation system, that's awesome. Just make sure that it's working properly and that all of your zones have good coverage. So go ahead and test that now before you get the seed on the ground. But if you want to learn more about that DIY system, I'll link all that info in the description as well. You have another opportunity right now to also figure out what's in your soil, what types of products and fertilizers you're going to need going forward for the best results, and make sure you're not wasting any money on fertilizers that you really don't need. I filmed a quick segment on soil testing as I was just doing some soil testing out at my new place, getting ready for some new plots out there. So let's go look at that info right now. So earlier this spring I did a soil test on all of these test plots, just to make sure I understood what type of nutrients I need for these. You can probably see over here that I've started fertilizing this side more of a spoon feed method, just like I have been starting on the plots now. But over here in this section, you can see a big kind of lime green color to it. This has not had any fertilizer on it, just one dose in the early spring, so nothing since then. And so it's definitely showing that, but now I would have the opportunity as I'm moving closer to fall, and I'm gonna put some more plots probably over in this section, or even if I leave it as the grass that's right there, I need to know exactly what I need to do for nutrients, and I'm gonna do a soil test just to figure that out. It's a very easy process. Let's go through that right now. So over here, I don't want to take just one spot. I would like to get this little section right here a good idea of probably 6 samples or so, just to make sure I don't hit one spot that has some weird anomaly to it. I want to get about 6 of the samples. I'm going to use my soil probe to do that. Then there's a kit here that we can use to easily figure out what we're going to need for nutrients. So on my soil probe here, I'm going to measure to about 6 inches. I have a spot on here that I already previously marked so I can see pretty much exactly where I need to go down for the soil sample, and then I have a clean bucket. So you're going to want to do this when you had some rainfall so that you can hopefully have a sample that will actually come out of the ground. If it's super dry, it's going to be pretty difficult to do. So then I'm just going to remove, if there's any sort of roots up here at the top, just going to remove those as much as I can. And I'm going to put this in here, and then I'll shake it up and I'll pick out most of the roots. But this has grass roots all the way down, all the way through the bottom. So I'm going to have to put this sample in here and then take out those roots, kind of mix it up and take them out. Okay, so now I have about 6-7 samples in here. I'm just going to start to break these up. And like I said, for me, this soil is pretty easy to work. For you, you might have a different situation, so just do your best to try to break this up as much as possible. And what I'm looking for are all these roots that are in here to pick through there and get rid of that. Just throw out anything root-wise that's a big clump of roots. This is the soil test kit that I'm going to use. Very easy. Comes with this soil collection bag and instructions here, but we pretty much just follow the instructions on getting the samples. So I'm going to pour this into here. Six-ish samples should be about the right amount. I'm probably just slightly over, but that looks like that'll be okay. So this soil collection bag will also have the sample ID on here, so all you're going to do is lay this back in here. Make sure that you save this card because this has your sample ID, but this is already prepaid. So you will just take this thing and seal it up and put it into the mail. Got your label right here on the other side, so it's all good to go. And then you will get an email once this is done. It takes about a week or so to get your results. And I talked about this in an earlier video this season about looking at the results, so I will link that right now if you want to go see how that all works. But this is a really easy kit to do. Have these on my website, so check that out. So this video is more about how to prepare for your lawn renovation, but if you want to go through all of those steps, see every single detail of how to do this, go ahead and check out this video right here. We'll quickly go through just the steps here, and if you want to see detailed information on those, go ahead and go through that video. So the quick info here is you'll have that grass sprayed out, everything will be dead. You're going to want to scalp this off, so set your mower pretty much as low as it goes, scalp off the grass as low as it goes. If you start to run into dirt, just raise it up enough to where you're not scalping into the dirt too much, but you want all that dead stuff removed as much as possible. Then you need to look and see whether or not you can see down to the soil layer. Like I said, if you had a fairly thick grass before and you can't see down to the soil, you're going to want to thin this in some way. I usually typically use a dethatcher, or you could rent a power rake. Whatever you do, you need to make sure that it's not too thick to where you put down the grass seed and it's just going to be sitting up on top of that canopy. Then once that's done, it's time to place your grass seed over here. Make sure that whatever grass type you use, you understand what the rate should be. It'll be in pounds per 1,000 square feet, so I typically recommend for a beginner, if you've never done this before, actually weigh out the seed and then start really slow on your spreader and walk over 1,000 square foot area that's measured out and learn what that looks like on the ground and what that even coverage looks like. And then you can go from there. You can probably do the rest of your project after you practice a little and understand what it should be. But if you really want to do it properly, go ahead and measure out the seed. It's not going to be a problem to do that. Then after that, I will typically roll this in. Now, if you don't have a roller, you probably can get away with not doing this step, but I would suggest it if possible. It doesn't have to be super heavy by any means, but a nice roll will press that seed right into the soil layer and you get the best seed to soil contact there. Then a light top dressing, very light top dressing over top of this will help to keep some of the birds away, and also it'll help to retain a bit of moisture as you start to do your watering process. This really can go before covering the seed as well, or it can go after. It doesn't really matter in my experience. Putting down the starter fertilizer, and then if you did want to do a blanket spray of tenacity, you could probably do that before covering the seed, but I have actually done it both ways and it's worked okay both ways. But if you're using the tenacity inside the starter fertilizer, I just go ahead and put this on as the last step before you start your watering. It's hard for me to tell you exactly how many times you need to water a day just because of varying soil types, different weather conditions, and all of that. But what you just need to remember is go ahead with small doses of water and look out there and just make sure things aren't drying out too much. You just want that grass seed to not get too dried out in this process. I know a lot of people are gone to work, so If you can set some sort of timers or have it set up so that you can do a system like that, this will help you a lot. Then it comes down to everyone wants to know, when should you start mowing this new grass? So depending on the height of cut that you intend, if you happen to be wanting to reel mow at 3/4 of an inch, you're going to need to start mowing it at almost an inch and get going on it right away. And it might seem like that's not a good idea, but you're going to have to do it in order to start training the grass like that. However, if you want it at 3 inches, then you can wait until it gets to about 4. Usually about an inch higher than where your intended height of cut is for that first cut is going to be totally fine. So that's covering the full renovation aspect, and like I said, I have a step-by-step video with much more detail on that if you want to learn that. Right now, instead of killing the whole lawn, you're not going to be doing that, but you could look at making sure you have your weeds under control. So if you happen to have some crabgrass out there right now, go ahead and start thinking about that control now, because most of these weed control products will have 3 to 4 weeks of time usually before you can put any grass seed on the ground. So it's a good time to start that now. Get some of these things under control before you start this overseed. Again, you're going to prepare your tools and grass seed and any top dressing materials that you're going to need during this renovation. So once again, just like the full lawn renovation and the step-by-step video I did on that, I do have a very comprehensive step-by-step video on the overseeding process. That will go into every detail you need to know, but quickly we'll go through the steps here. A reminder again for those of you who are just watching the overseeding portion, we do have a sale right now on our lawn level, and also Landsea has been kind enough to do a 10% off sale just for our viewers here on their peat moss compost spreader. So use the code RENO in the next week to get 10% off of that. You're going to want to thin out or remove any of the dead material from the summer that's happened in your lawn. So this is easily done with a dethatcher, or you can rent a power rake or something to go through the lawn, rip out all that dead material, and you're going to want to collect that and make sure it's thinned out enough of all the stuff you don't want stuck in there before you get the grass seed down. This is another easy process for overseeding, because you're just going to go out there with your spreader, put the seed over top of the existing lawn that you have, but do make sure you pay attention to the overseeding rates on your grass type. These are going to be a little lower than a full lawn renovation, so you want to make sure you pay attention to those, because too much grass seed is not a great thing and it will lead to overcrowding and other problems. If you need to measure out your grass seed to make sure you're accurate on how much you're putting down per 1,000 square feet, go ahead and do that. Nothing wrong with making sure you know what you're putting down. Then I'm going to roll in that grass seed in. So this is again a step that you could probably get away with not doing if you don't have a roller, but usually these are pretty cheap to rent as well, and I found that it just gives you the best seed to soil contact if you do a light roll. Now if you have pretty good grass cover already, there's a lot of times where I will not do anything to cover the grass seed whatsoever. If you have a pretty good canopy there, it's going to help to keep that new grass seed down exactly where it needs to be, and I've found that you really don't need any sort of top dressing, but some people like to put something on there. If you do have some thinner grass or you have some thinner areas, then a really light top dressing on top of there to keep the seed from drying out, keep birds away from it, that's totally fine to do as well. Just don't smother it too heavy. Next thing here is the same thing as a full lawn renovation. You can put down your tenacity, spray that down if you'd like, or if you're using a starter fertilizer, I'd recommend the one that has the tenacity in it, and you'll put this down now after you get the grass seed down. So I've talked about this probably years ago now, but sometimes I would wait on that starter fertilizer in an overseed situation, 3-4 days maybe, to give that new seed a bit of a head start to get growing before you start to put starter fertilizer on the existing grass that's there. Because what you're going to find is as soon as you hit that starter fertilizer on the existing grass, that's going to also want to grow really quickly once you get a lot of water on it. And so sometimes it starts to outgrow that new seed, and you just don't want that to happen. So you can also delay it a few days. It's going to be totally fine, but make sure that you get that starter fertilizer down before you start to see new grass seed pop up. Then you're going to want to water the same as your full lawn renovation, just to keep the seed from drying out. And again, it's very hard for me to tell you exactly how much that is. Just keep an eye on it. And the other benefit of overseeding versus the full lawn renovation is you do have that existing grass in place. Once you start to water, it helps to hold some of the moisture there so you're not sitting with bare ground. So this is easier too. You typically don't need quite as much water in an overseeding situation as you do on a bare ground lawn renovation. Same type of scenario here. You're going to want to wait to mow this, but don't let it get 5 or 6 inches tall, because once that existing grass gets too tall, start shading out your new stuff. I know it might seem painful to go out there and start mowing it when maybe that new grass isn't as mature as you think it should be, but be very careful and just do your best to not do any major turns on the lawn. But you're going to have to go out and start mowing to not allow that existing grass to get too tall. So a common question throughout both of these processes would be, well, what if you wanted to level your lawn? Where does this step fit in to either one of these scenarios? So after you've killed off your grass in a full lawn renovation, I would scalp off the grass, I would thin it out, and then I would do my leveling work. This is going to make sure that you have everything thinned out enough to get a nice even level on there. Now if you're doing an overseeding project, this gets to be a little more difficult just because of that existing grass that's in place. So you're going to have to cut that down pretty low, almost to like a scalp, in order to see where your high and low spots are and not to smother the grass completely. So it's more difficult in an overseeding situation, but it still can be done. But if you do happen to smother any areas during your overseed, you can just treat those areas like a full lawn renovation, and you just seed slightly higher into those bare soil areas, and it will work out just fine. For this, I would really recommend more of a topsoil that matches sort of what you have in your soil already. This is going to work best for most renovations. I wouldn't be getting into sand leveling or things like that personally on this type of renovation work. That gets to be more of just a leveling project down the road once you have good grass in place. So right now, I would just worry more about leveling with a material that's very similar to what you have in your yard currently. So how about fall fertilizer or fall weed control? These are other common questions. I'd like to do another fertilizer about 4 weeks after germination. Whether that's another round of starter or you did a soil test and you know more what you need to target at that point, pick whatever you need to use, but about 4 to 6 weeks is the time frame when I'll add another round of fertilizer. As far as weed control goes in the fall, you want to make sure with most products that you've got at least 3 to 4 mows on this new grass before you start any weed control. And typically, unless there's something major happening, I don't worry too much about the weed control in this initial fall. I'm worried more about getting the grass healthy, getting it mowed consistently, and making sure it can make it through winter before I start stressing it out with weed control. Another way of fertilizing that I use throughout the whole year, but that you can do on this lawn renovation stuff too, is really low doses of fertilizer more often. If you want to do spoon feeding and you want to do low applications more often, that's going to be totally fine during this process too. So again, think about how important it is to continue your mowing and be very consistent with it. If you did this lawn renovation or overseeding project, about a month later it should be coming in, you should be starting to get excited about it, but make sure to remember how important mowing is and the consistent mowing. As much as you can possibly mow it consistently, just taking off little bits of grass at a time, it's going to help it a lot to make sure it doesn't get too tall, gets mowed down, too tall, mowed down. So do the most consistent mowing that you can. Hopefully by the end of this first fall, you can stand back and admire your hard work. Remember that this is a marathon, it is not a sprint. So remember, it takes time for grass to mature and to grow in to look its absolute best. Have some patience with that. I know it is difficult, but if you're using great grass seed, you're doing what you need to do. This thing should be looking really great this fall, but next season is when you're going to see the results really shine. I hope you're proud of all of your hard work. Leave a comment down below and check out all those videos that I said if you want the step-by-step, really detailed versions of all this stuff. Appreciate you watching today. We'll see you next time.